Today I'm joined by Noel Joyce, and after a mountain biking accident left him paralysed, Noel didn't let this stop him. Noel has not only reclaimed his passion for mountain biking, but he has revolutionised the sport for others. He's gone on to design, construct and ride adaptive mountain bikes. And as if this wasn't enough, his visionary project at NYU involves the creation of the world's first open source adaptive mountain bike. Smashing barriers that have hindered those eager to experience the thrill of the sport, join me through the life of Noel Joyce. I think it's great to always go back a little bit and to start a little bit in the past of, what resonates most with who you are today and kind of, your story as to, what happened, and sometimes even going a little bit further back if that's what you feel most resonates with, everything that
Yeah.
happened.
Well, if I go back to the start, I always think about bicycles, as a pretty. It's something that everyone can connect to. It's almost like the first sort of item that we can use for more freedom than just walking or running or whatever it might be. Brings us further places, things like that, right? So, I was always like tinkering and messing around with bicycles. And in my earlier years when I was a teenager, I actually worked in bike shops as well. So a bicycle shop here in Tullamore called Buckley Cycles, and I was always tinkering and messing around with bikes. So I always had a keen interest in it. But after a while, um, I sort of fell out of love with it a little bit and ended up then going and joining the military here in Ireland. I became a soldier, and I was in the army then for about 5 6 years, and that's when around about 2000 and 2005 it was I had my accident, um, and that finished my career in the military because I couldn't be a soldier anymore. But I was very lucky because the military, the Irish Army, they supported me when I went back to college. So I went back to college to study industrial design. Um, and when I had the accident at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do because I sort of right career was going to be this thing, but when I was in hospital, I seen a lot of people with different types of disabilities, and I thought, is there a career that you could be involved in that helps people with disabilities from the perspective of the lived environment, the products that we use, that kind of thing? So it was while I was in a hospital I chose the path of industrial design. If anyone doesn't know what industrial design is, it's basically anything you put your hand on that's a physical object. An industrial designer had to have some input on that, trying to figure out like human factors and how a product works and all that sort of stuff. It's quite, the more I learn about it, the less I know. So it's sort of like such a massively broad field. Yeah, and so that was sort of the path to how I ended up um, working on products, physical products, and part of the journey of mountain biking for me as well has been that because I ended up designing my own bikes.
So obviously what we want to do is I want to talk to you all about the bikes and kind of the concept of designing it, but before we do, what happened in the accident?
Oh well, yeah, it's always because you mentioned it's August, nearly August now. It was August 18 years ago when I had the accident. So I'm literally, only a week or two away from my paraversary. The time I became a paraplegic, became paraplegic. Um, so I was out on a really really miserable day on the bike. And I was coming down a hill in a place called Mullaghmeen. It's an area in Ireland where a lot of natural trails, nothing really, we'll say, established at the time. And this is like 18 years ago. Um, and I was coming down a hill, and the tires just get packed up with mud, so the bike just keeps sliding. It doesn't slow down. Um, and then I hit a tree, and it wasn't the tree that did the damage. Like I had a helmet on and everything. I fell backwards onto a patch of rocks and landed on my back on the rocks, and it was instant. Because my knees were this close to my face, but I couldn't feel anything. And I was there, sort of all of my muscles below my chest just were not functioning, and I couldn't even draw enough breath or air to scream with the pain. It was just, stuck there on the side of the hill, in this position, not able to move, terrified. And it was a really, really rainy day. You know, it's one thing when you're wet and it's a warm day. That's, you're going to be. It's not too bad. If it's a cold day and it's not wet, then it's not too bad. But the combination of cold and wet, and you become sort of like, you start to get like the shock, the fear, the cold, the wet, all of it sort of massively overwhelming. And I remember uh, waking up a couple of times. So I obviously went out with the pain a couple of times um, and came back out. Um, and it was just one of those things, I think about it sometimes, and it's absolutely, you know, it's terrible to think about, but at the same time, and I know it's sort of cliche to talk about this idea that every cloud has a silver lining. I wouldn't even be talking to you today if that hadn't have happened, right? Where I went on this journey afterwards, and sometimes you have to stop what you're doing, and maybe it's a forced stop that you don't realize that it's supposed to happen to bring you in a direction that you're supposed to go. Um, so when that happened, luckily I'd been out with another guy, that I'd only met a couple of weeks previously, that was looking to go mountain biking, and he went and he found some people. Again, because it was such a bad day, the weather, there was no one out on the hill, so it was very, he was gone for a good while, and again, it was terrifying because you're there for a couple of hours like that, and then the emergency services have to come along, and because I'm so far up the hill, they have to stretcher me down, and every step that they take with me on the stretcher, I can feel this jolt of more pain. Um, and then into an ambulance and to the closest hospital, and they were sort of like, nope, not our area of expertise. You need to get him to Dublin, and that was it. Up to Dublin to the Mater Hospital, where they performed surgery. I think it was less than 24 hours later. Um, and yeah, then to rehabilitation hospital. That was another few months. So that's sort of like what happened and the timeline and sequence of stuff up to getting to the hospital.
What surgery did they perform on you?
Would they done a fusion with four titanium rods, and I think there's 28 screws in there, to sort of like, because I was T6 and T7 vertebrae got crushed, so it was to try and keep the vertebrae separate, so you don't have the spinal compression and things like that. So um, it was T6 T7 complete, so like complete transection, that's a cut through the spinal cord. But I think that's something that's all the time, right? Doesn't matter, and anything better than that is great. So because sometimes I think I do believe I'll walk again someday. Whether it's through, well, I have done on an exoskeleton, right? But whether it's through a medical intervention or whatever it might be, I'm I'm sure it'll happen. But it's just like the injury was very, very, like, I broke a load of teeth and all sorts of different things. Next day after surgery, I was picking twigs out of my hair and stuff, and it's just an enormous shock in a short period of time. Um, yeah. And the weirdest thing about it was, I suppose, when you're in hospital, you are in the moment of the shock, so you're not really sort of registering how other people are reacting to what's going on. But people coming in and they're looking at you going, sort of, they can't get over this idea that's what it is now. Um, but you're sort of just trying to get through and manage, which I think is sometimes the nature of these things, uh, that when your survival instinct kicks in, you don't realize how bad it actually is. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, but that's what's interesting you were saying is that it is just surviving, getting through that day, that hour, that minute. Some people don't even realize. So, not being able to take in everything else because your survival instinct is to just get through this
Mm.
moment, and then the next one you'll figure it out at the next moment. But what I love about what you said actually is that you have hope, and you believe in yourself that you are going to walk one day, which is it's a wonderful thing to hear, because a lot of people do lose hope, and a lot of people don't believe in themselves. So the fact that you can still sit here and you can say, well, I believe I'm going to walk one day, it's that hope. And I think that if anyone can hold on to anything in life, it's just hope. If you can hold on to even a tiny piece of hope, it it can just help you again in those moments, and it can help you get through each day in a way.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
And then I wanted to ask then, so why do you believe in, every cloud has a silver lining?
Um, because I think that you know, for me at the time, it was this enormous reset, right? It was like at the time the relationship I was in broke down. That didn't survive. Career was gone. All hope of anything that was, um, the direction I was going in life was just evaporated, and it all happened in a split second, right? It's just. But then it was like the. I think it sort of goes back to my military career where um, you got to see pretty bad things and how people have a harder life even than me with my disability, right? So, because I served in Liberia for 6 months and got to see like great things and miracles of human life and how people manage and how they survive. And then I understand too, in a place like that, someone with an injury like mine might only last 3 years. So you sort of look at that it from the perspective that I was in a country, in a place where I knew I was going to be okay, and that I had a start point to go from. That when it's all gone, you don't have anything else to lose. You can only build on that, right? So, um, it was sort of like I said when I was in um, hospital in rehabilitation. It was like, okay, what am I going to do next? Where am I going to go? And immediately, sort of a lot of that sort of I think um, military training, train of thought, discipline kicks in, and you sort of go, okay, there are the things like you mentioned. They're the things I need to get through today to achieve my objectives. These are the things I need to do to achieve my objectives. And I made a sort of competition out of recovery while in rehabilitation. I was like, right, they say I'm going to be here for 4 months. I'm getting out in three. They say this is what I need to do. I'm gonna do it twice. They tell me I can't do it. I'm gonna do it twice. So that kind of way of thinking about it, being so preoccupied with achieving an objective that you're making gains, and when you make the gains, then like you're creating that value in yourself, and that other people can see and go, okay, it's not as bad, and then moving forward. So um, and it might seem really strange, but um, to leverage my disability and what people see now in a way that I'm able to go, okay, I'm able to achieve something that might seem extraordinary just because I'm in a wheelchair, but it's not. It's just an ordinary thing. I just happen to be in a wheelchair doing it, right? So I think it's a way for people to remember. Do you remember that person who has that disability who did that thing? It's easier for them to remember that than do you remember that person who did that thing? No, several people have done that, right? So I think that in a weird way, it's a silver lining that you have a different, more memorable thing to be able to put in people's minds. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's sort of
It does actually make sense. I do understand. I understand exactly what you're trying to say, so it does make sense. Because, well, this is the thing, is you've now, I mean, you are mountain biking again.
yeah.
And you have created, obviously, tell me if I'm wrong, but you have created now your own adaptive mountain bike, right?
Right, right. So, you know, if we go back again, I know I'm going back and forward and doing this, but if we go back to studying industrial design, I ended up finishing when I was near the end of my college. Did get my degree. Myself and a couple of other people got together and we started a collaborative doing design. And the reason why we did that was because it was actually quite difficult to get work. Um, as a designer, it's very, very difficult. I probably got into one of the most difficult professions to get a job in is industrial design, and for that reason, I ended up starting a startup with another guy, and we developed some products and we sold them, and learned a lot about how you develop a business through that process. But I also ended up going to China to see some of those products being made. And I spent maybe 8 months out of every year for the 8 years before the pandemic in China working with hundreds of startups and different types of products, and developed a very unique skill set that allowed me then to start thinking about bigger projects such as the bike one. So uh, the bike didn't just come around as right. I'm going to design a bike. It was a different process entirely. When the pandemic happened and I came home, um, I actually started to teach at NYU, New York University, at that stage. Um, when I was at home, I started to go out on a bike that I did have, and but it quickly went past the capabilities of that bike, start breaking stuff, and then I, I, you know, I probably sounded like a crackpot to a lot of people, but I was reaching out to bike companies and going, not like standard bike companies, but bike companies that build adaptive bikes, and going, look, I have these great ideas. I'd love to work with you, and blah blah blah. But I'm sure everyone was like, that's just another, crazy person looking to sort of get stuff done cheaply or whatever. And that was my pitch. I was like, look, I have these great ideas. If you help me to work on them, I'm happy to sort of, pass over these ideas or whatever. Um, no one was biting, so I eventually then found a company in Spain who were interested in working with me on the project, and I said, "Look, here's all the ideas," and they did. To be fair, they did a lot of the design development of the bike because they were working in a material I knew nothing about, carbon fiber. But I had a lot of ideas that they implemented in that design, and together we created this world first, the full suspension carbon fiber adaptive mountain bike. Now, there is mountain bikes out there, adaptive mountain bikes out there, but they are enormously expensive. I mean, something capable is probably starting at about 12,000 euros. So, for me, it was, very difficult decisions had to be made around, do I spend this kind of money on a bike? And it wasn't a difficult decision once I got the bike because it brought me further places. I could see more things, whatever. But what did happen was I did have like a part fail. It was true pilot error, we'll say, because I, landed hard on a jump and broke a part. And what happened at that point was, when that part broke, we were stuck in the forest. And I know I wasn't injured, but that sort of that 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 fear came back from the original crash where I'm stuck here. How do I get out? What am I going to do? Right? Like it's not like the pain part and the injury part wasn't there, but all of the stuff surrounding that, getting cold. It was just the weirdest thing to start to feel those things again. And I felt like this is not the way an adaptive bike should be. You should be able to get out of these situations in some way. You should be able to, manage. Now, I was with a friend again, and after many cable ties and ratchet straps and whatnot, we got the bike into a condition where we could get off the trail and I could get back to the car park. And then I reached out to the company and I said, look, how much is it going to cost to replace the part? And they told me an astronomical figure and a ridiculous amount of time for the part to be replaced. And it was like, why is it that people with disabilities are penalized to this degree because you can't go into the bike shop to get the part, and you utterly depend on the organization who made the component to make that component for you because it's a specialist component. And it was 6 weeks of my life that I wouldn't be able to enjoy the thing that I wanted to do. And I felt like if that's like that for everyone with a disability, how is anyone going to sort of maintain like, because there's these peaks of I get out and I do this and it's amazing, but then it's all gone in a second, and it's like you have to wait because you have no choice. So for me, it was like that's just doesn't sit well with me. I'm like going that if I have a way to solve that problem, can I do it? So that's when I went back and I designed the bike from front to back with a couple of objectives. One of them is that the parts could all be made uh, with a CNC machine. We use a standard pipe diameter for the frame, and it could all be bolted together. So if you did break a component, you could switch it out quickly. And the parts would take no more than 2 weeks to manufacture. Depending on if you want to spend a little bit more, you can get them quicker. But the idea was to put an adaptive bike on par with a regular bike from a repairability perspective and speed of repair and also cost effectiveness. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mentioned this idea of 6 weeks, right? 6 weeks is a long time by any measure. Um, it's it's even longer when you have a disability because your time frame and window for being able to do the things you love is not as big because of your body deteriorating, and there's going to be points where it's just not possible, right? So when you take that chunk of 6 weeks away from someone, you're probably taking in regular able-bodied maybe a few years, right? So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? And that's why I designed the bike back to front, that we could make all the parts quickly, easily, and then I decided that I'm going to open source that design as well, that anyone can get those files and build their own bike. So that's the journey of the bike so far. Well, no, there's a whole lot more, but we can talk about that.
I think what's obviously really interesting is that, I mean, obviously, it is a case of when people go through things, they then can use what they've been through, their experiences, into what they do next. And even when you were going out and you were trialing each new bike, obviously, unfortunately, you had the accident again afterwards, which made you feel very similar to the first one. But it was even in like that moment when you kind of realize, okay, wait a minute, that means I need to change XYZ on the
Mm.
bike. And I guess that's kind of what it is, isn't it? It's when we look at obstacles or what we think are setbacks, actually it's not. It's an opportunity. And in that in itself, you were able to see exactly what you needed to then change for the bike for other people moving forward.
Mm.
And I do want to ask then, if someone does want to get a bike, where can they locate one?
So what we're doing, hopefully by the end of this year, is releasing the files. But what we actually did at the beginning of this year is at NYU, we started the project where we decided to try and get a few bikes built. We wanted to prove out the concept of this, right? So we started the project at NYU and we called it Project Mjolnir. I don't know if you know what Mjolnir is. Mjolnir, no? So
No.
Mjolnir was Thor's hammer, right? So Thor had this hammer, it was called Mjolnir, and he could break everything down. And this idea of breaking down all the barriers for people, that's where this, the inspiration for this name came from. Um, a divine instrument for breaking down barriers. And also, like, sort of for the nerdy people that might know, Mjolnir was the class of armor that John 117 from the Halo video games used to wear. So it was this sort of these ideas were what were the story of the whole project. And we started the project last January with the objective to build 4 bikes at 4 locations in order to show that you could build a bike anywhere. Um, and we got sponsorship and help from Specialized Bicycles, from SRAM Bicycle Components, and a few others as well. And we built a bike in New York. We built one in Abu Dhabi. We're building one in Shanghai in September, and we're building one here in Ireland in the next few weeks. And the idea was that like we can put a set of parts anywhere in the world and assemble a bike, an adaptive bike, for under 3,000 euros for a basic one, and an electric assist one probably closer to about 4,000. Um, and through that process, we're learning how to, make sure that that when people get the files, they're able to build a bike. Because I don't want to put something in the world and go, there's files, and go and do it. I want to show that it's actually possible through the process of doing it. Right. To speak to what you were talking about before, what do we need to change? How do we need to change it in order for people to be able to do it? So that's where we are with it. And I think in this fall semester, or autumn semester, we'll say, this part of the world, we will begin to release those files that people can get a hold of them and start to build bikes off of that CAD file. Or if they need to get the parts, um, I'm more than happy to share the details of the people I've been working with to get the components. But that's the sort of journey. Like, I'd rather that we get this right and that we know it's doable and then release it, than sort of go, because it's difficult otherwise.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's making sure that it is right before you kind of do put it out there for everybody else, because I mean, it's important to do it in that way. It makes a lot of sense. I actually do know that it was Thor's hammer. I just didn't actually realize that that's what you were referring to. So Thor's one of my favorite superheroes. So when
All
you
right.
said it, I was like, oh no, like, of course I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting as well, because a lot of the time when I speak to people here, and something that I always am fascinated by is that people, when they've had an accident or an injury in a specific area in their life or a sport, and they go back to it, because I think that's something that it's terrifying. You've had something happen once. How was it for you to go through that again? Because you are mountain biking again, and that's where your accident was. So where was it when you kind of said, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to face my fears, and I'm going to get back out there?
Mm. Yeah. So again, it was my neighbor, Robert, who was a mountain biker, who was into mountain biking, and he said you should come to the local trails, and I was like, I don't think I can go on the trails. He said, well, we'll go on the fire roads and we'll, and I said, okay, sure, why not? We went, and when we went up the hill, I felt like this is amazing to be in nature again to this degree, to be places that a lot of people wouldn't even go if they're able-bodied, right? Um, and then we got to the top of one of the first like mountain bike trails, the easier ones there, and it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, we're here now. I can either go back down the easy way or I can go down this way and see what happens. I said, how much more damage can you do to yourself? It's probably not possible to make it any worse. So we just went for it. And when I was going down there, uh, it was not a terrifying experience from the perspective of I could have an accident. It was a terrifying experience, but it was on that side where adrenaline kicked in, where it felt so amazing. The reason why I did it in the first place, it came back. It all came flooding back. This whole feeling that you know um, that I had before the accident, the reasons for doing the sport. And there's another thing that happened as well, that is the exact same thing every time I go out now. I am no longer disabled there, because while we might be in our built environments, there's a lot of places that are inaccessible and difficult to get around, and the frustration is there because we as humans built those things, but we didn't maybe consider disability. When we go into the forest on a piece of um, uh, technology that allows you to do that, the technology is the enabler, and the forest isn't inaccessible, right? And it's just being able to do that's really incredible. Um, but it's the other part of it that I am no longer carry a disability when I'm on the trail. It's like the wheelchair is not there, the disability is not there anymore. I'm out there in nature, going down the trails and having fun. And then the fear as well, the absolute terror on some of those trails. The fear, like everyone loves fear, the adrenaline from the fear, right? They might not like how they get to that point, but that feeling is something that's just indescribable, right? And I feel like that sometimes when you're on those downhills, because you don't think about anything else, but that absolute thing you need to concentrate on, you separate totally from whether it's a disability, whether it's life's problems, whether it's things you're worried about outside of, what you're doing right now. None of that matters anymore. It doesn't exist because you can't afford for it to be part of what you're doing at that point. So being able to completely separate gives you a break, right? Gives you a break from things that might be a difficulty. Um, and it's also, I feel like that it's really valuable from the perspective of you get to a flow state, this sort of thing where you must concentrate utterly to manage. And repeating that flow state means that like you carry uh, parts of that into every other part of your life where, you know, for me, when I start to work now, I find myself able to get to a flow state of what I do much faster because I have the experience of getting out at the weekends on the bike and just separating and having to be in that flow state. So, yeah, it's largely positive. Sometimes it's terrifying, but I haven't found with the exception of a couple of times where we break the bike or something, um, I got over the fear pretty quickly of the accident part of it.
Yeah, it's what you were saying about flow state is the thing is a lot of people can find in all walks of life different ways that they can get into this flow state. And it was really interesting because when you were talking about how you do it and how you feel it when you are on the bike, I was thinking about and a very similar thing because I was thinking about I rock climb, and it's exactly the same when you have to focus on you have to focus on what's right in front of you. And I think that's why it's so fascinating as well, is because in any way that people can get into this flow state, it is focusing on exactly what is in front of you in that moment. And once I mean, it's an amazing feeling when you are in that state. It is an amazing feeling. And it's really nice to hear that kind of, what I really liked as well was that you said that what made you get into it in the first place all those years ago, the feelings that you had all those years ago, you have them again. And I think that's also something that's really lovely to hear, because I think people probably also think if they want to try something again for the first time that they might have done however many years ago, that it won't be the same. But it can be the same, but also different, but also the same,
Mm,
if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Of course, it's different, right? Because I don't. It's actually I feel like a little bit more challenging because you know, no one went out and built a mountain bike trail and said some lunatic in a wheelchair is going to try and go down here one day, right? So they didn't make them wider. They didn't make them, So the bike is wider. It's a bit different to handle. You have to think differently about how you corner. All these different things, right? I mean, the assumptions that you might have had your first time around don't work the second time around when you're doing it with a disability. And what's really interesting for me is that every time I go out, I'm learning something new. It's like I've not just reconnected to the sport, not just got back to the original tribe I was in, but I'm learning a new set of ways of managing on the trail. And what I feel like is really interesting about that is that I think disability preps you, like having a disability preps you, or um, carrying a disability and the way you plan and think about things prepares you for um, new learning experiences. So, like, I always talk about disability as it's an inherent part of the human condition, regardless of you liking it or not. You're going to end up disabled when you get old enough, right? And if we don't sort of embrace that idea and sort of go, okay, this is something we can learn from or utilize in a way um, to benefit everyone in the future, then what you know what are we doing? We have this unique opportunity, and again, I go back to the idea that I think people with disabilities often become some of the best problem solvers because their entire existence is based around that. They like for me, it's get up in the morning before I go to bed. Right, is everything in a position where I can manage tomorrow morning? It's not get out of bed, go over and get stuff and manage. It's everything has to be prepared, right? And you're going through this state of preparation at all times during your life. Um, and I think when you're like that, when it sort of bleeds into the other parts of your life as well. Like when I go mountain biking, preparation is key. Get there when what's the weather like? What's the trail going to be like? Are we prepared for this? What's going to happen when we go down there? You're almost living in the future before it's happened, just because you can't afford to get away with it otherwise, right? And you're learning how to read what's going on much in a different way. So I feel like that um, there's like this forced uh, rewiring of your neural networks to consider things that didn't even happen yet. That forces you into the future and being able to sort of go, okay, this is how I'm going to manage if that occurs or this occurs, and then that then comes down to sort of these micro decisions on the trail. What if I hit that rock? What if that thistle hits me in the hand? What if this happens? And this is happening at 30 kilometers an hour. So the challenge, while it might not be 50 kilometers an hour on a regular bike, uh, the challenge is just as big and just as fun to try and go through, even though you're going slower. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think I'm having more fun now than I did the first time round. Not sure.
Oh, that's it's nice to hear that you're saying that you think you're having more fun. And I think, but what you can also do is that you can implement that into it's like implementing that into everyday life as well, like you were saying. But I think it can go for anyone as well. It's you can try, like you said, you did it before, and yes, obviously it's very different, and the ways that you did it before were very different to how you do it now, even though the feelings are, if not the same or almost better. But it's like with anything, you can do something once and you can continue doing it for however long, and then suddenly it doesn't work out anymore for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean give up, because there is not just one other way that you can try it. There are an infinite amount of ways that you can try what works for you. And just because it works for you, it might not work for someone else, or if it works for someone else, it might not work for you. But it is to keep going and to keep trying, because if you want something that bad and you want to feel the same way again, you have to keep going and you have to keep trying. It's all trial and error, and you will get there, and you can end up having even more fun than you ever had before.
For yeah, definitely the case, and I think that the initial barrier is that the fear, and I completely understand it. It took me what 15 years before I did anything like that again. Right? There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, there is the technological barrier. I don't think adaptive mountain bikes existed in their current guise up until maybe 5, maybe 6 years ago. So the technology wasn't there. And I still think that's an enormous barrier for a lot of people because, if you buy a regular bike and you go out and you try and you don't like it, you'll sell it to someone else who's able bodied. Whereas an adaptive bike is going to cost you in order of magnitude, maybe 10 times as much money for a really good one. And then you can't sell it because it's generally designed and built for you as an individual, or you end up, people are afraid of the sport, so they don't want to spend that kind of money on a bike. So I think that um, there's a few barriers still there, but we it doesn't mean that we don't keep working to try and break them down. Like you said, there's ways around. Like for me, it was like, I have to get this bike. I have to be able to do this. I have to be able to get to the next level. How do I do that? What do I have within? I always think about like what are the resources I have to enable myself, rather than what do I not have that holds me back, and then leverage those as much as possible. And for me, I took a career path that allowed me to do this stuff, right? Um, but that doesn't mean anyone can't work on those things. Like I'm always encouraging people with disabilities who might reach out to me and ask, "Oh, can you design a thing for me?" I said, there's free software. There's this. You're time rich. Maybe you don't have so much money, but you're time rich. So learn, learn this stuff. Constantly educate yourself. Bring yourself forward. And don't because I think what happens to us, and I'm like 44 now, right? I think what happens to us is as we get older, we feel like we should know, but we don't actually, and we don't want to admit that. That's probably one of our biggest fears. We don't want to learn something new because we feel like we should know, or we feel like it's an enormous waste of time. And I'm always like, you know, I don't know anything about anything all the time, and just treat everything like that, and then just try and learn as much about it as you can. Um, and even if it's a little bit every day, it really helps, right? So yeah, I think to speak to what you talked about, never giving up. Again, it's very cliched, but what does never giving up look like? It might look like 10 minutes a day learning a new piece of software, but that's all it needs to be actually moving yourself forward. Um, and even and we're all, and again, we can talk about different types of disability, but different people are not going to be able to do as much as others, and that's completely fine too. Like, I mean, something I'm learning along the way is like, and part of the reason why we're doing the project at NYU is, different people with different disabilities won't be able to manage the bike in the same way. So we need to be able to consider that and develop the bike in different directions, to enable more people to have the same experience. So yeah, we're always learning, always making progress. Doesn't matter how small, you know.
I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that it's I mean, it's totally okay to keep learning. And like I think you said it exactly in that way, is that some people feel that they should know everything, or, they feel like, oh no, I shouldn't be learning this, at whatever stage of life I'm in. But it's actually okay to keep learning, because we're all learning. We've never been in these situations. We've never been in this exact moment ever.
Mm.
This is the
Yeah.
first time we've ever been in this exact moment, right this
Mm.
second. And so we are always learning as we go through every phase of life, every person we meet, everything we do. So it's okay to keep learning, because actually I mean, I love learning. I'm learning all the time, as are you. And you find out so many different things when you're open to want to keep learning as well. When you're open to it, then it does, you learn so much more when you're not open, let's say. Um, and also what we were talking about, yes, never giving up, and how cliche that might sound. But with all of that in mind, if you did have, not if you did, what is a piece of advice that you would give to somebody that, I mean, what you gave before was great advice, but if what is a piece of advice that you would give to somebody that, say they're at the journey where they want to try that thing again, whatever it might be, they want to try that thing again, but they're too scared for whatever their reasons are, because every reason is very different, but they are too scared. What would you say to them?
Mm. I sort of feel like that. What what was it for me at the moment when I wanted to do it again was, just if you can grab a hold of some of the memories, and try and counter the fear with those memories, right? So it's like, I'm terrified to go down this hill, but remember that time you did that and it was amazing, right? What if it's like that? Make the what ifs about positives rather than about negatives, because I think when we have catastrophic impact in our life, we always think about what ifs in relation to the negative outcome of that thing happening. But if we can sort of grab a hold of what went before that, why we were doing it, maybe we can sort of pull those memories into the what ifs and go, what if it's amazing? What if it's the best thing I've ever done? What if I get to feel all of those things again, right? That's the way I would approach the thing that I'd be afraid of. But that fear is there for us in the learning capacity as well, and I think that that's important too as well, to sort of expand on that a little bit. Maybe go, what if when I learn this, I can help others? What if you know, when I do this, that I create something that never existed before, that I bring a value into the world that just didn't exist, and benefits other people too, right? What if I made money from it, right? Become something more than just what I feel like I am right now. Through being able to do those things, empower myself. Um, yeah, that's the long-winded approach, but that's the way I would think about it.
I like it because it's what if, I mean, what if it all works out? What if, your dreams do come true, rather than thinking about the negative what ifs, because we all seem to focus on the negatives way too much.
Mm.
It's focusing on the, but what if, what if something absolutely amazing happens? And I think once you start focusing on the positives, they are more likely to come.
Mm.
Not even more likely, they are going to come when you start focusing on them a lot more.
Mm.
So with all of that in mind, is there anything else that you wanted to discuss today?
Not really, but I just think about when we were talking about what ifs, it would have been the same for me reaching out to you. It was like, what if I reach out to her and see if she wants to chat about this? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to tell me no. This is this crackpot from Ireland going on about this stuff, but it turned out to be a good thing, right? So, um, yeah, I don't have anything else. If you have any more questions, I could talk about this stuff all day.
It's actually what you were just saying about the what if reaching out to somebody is, well, I mean, that's exactly what happened. If you didn't reach out to me, we might not be here right now. And it is very much a case, it is very much a case of that as well. And there have been plenty of moments in my life, especially when I started this, where I would sit there and I would say to myself, oh no, I don't want to, I can't reach out to that person. I shouldn't reach out to that person, or for whatever it is. And then I used to say to and I still do it. I say, but what if I just do it? What if
Mm.
I just do it? Because I know the vision, I know the dream, I know the goal. So what if I just do it? And I think it is, everybody has it. Everybody has it. Whatever they're doing in life, wherever they are, whoever they want to speak to, they are at that crossroad where they think, do I want to go and say hello, or
Mm.
do I want to message this person? What if the worst thing that's going to happen is they are going to say no?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the thing is what I've learned. And then if they do say no, actually it's a win-win, because you actually win in that situation either way. Because yes, obviously if they say yes, then perfect, amazing. But if they say no, you still won, because you've shown yourself you have the confidence to
Mm.
do the thing that scared you. You have the confidence to go over and say hi.
Yeah, yeah,
Send the
yeah.
message. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's always, I think that, again, if I think about, like, learning new stuff, whatnot, the very least you get from every scenario is the advance you made for yourself. That's the very least in every single one of those scenarios. It's just a little bit that we're afraid of what people think, or we're worried about wasting time, or whatever it might be. But you do get better at picking what are the what ifs you want to go after
Yeah.
over time. It's not, you can't be what if about everything, right? Because you'd never have time for yourself otherwise.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. You're right. You do find out the right what ifs, but when you feel them, and you really feel them, you just have, it's so much easier said than done, I know, but you just have to do them. And once you start doing them, it does get easier.
Mm, yeah, for sure.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I am very excited to come to London. It's not to London, I'm in London. I am very excited to come to Ireland and give mountain biking a go, because I love to do things like that. And I'm looking forward to seeing the bike as well.
Sure. Yeah, that would be great. Anytime.
Perfect. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining me. And there you have it. Noel's journey reminds us that we can rise and conquer. Mountain biking is more than just a sport for Noel. It's a gateway to the elusive flow state, when challenges melt away and pure joy and freedom take over. So this week, think about the things that you do that take you into the flow state. Euphoria, peace, where all your worries and thoughts drift away. I enter that state a lot when I'm rock climbing and I'm in the mountains. So where do you find that flow state, and how can you enter it more often? Keep seeking that flow state in your very own life. So stay tuned for more incredible stories, and thank you for joining us. Until next time, remember that you have the power to get back up.